For the last 24 hours I've been sick, haven't been able to do anything, had stomach flu. There we go. Fukushima versus Chernobyl. The idea that a person can't just measure the radiation output at a nuclear accident and get it right is something that apparently a lot of people desperately need to be real. Either that or it's falsified for various bizarre reasons. So I'm going to bring up a couple of things here just from the get-go. The entirety of the Japanese nuclear industry, most of their politicians, basically the whole freaking mess, has been infamous for just doubling down and BSing their way through it. But anybody can use a Geiger counter and go check on stuff. So that's one of the things that, if it's literally impossible to lie about something, you're gonna get caught, don't do it. And they've been pretty good about not lying about any of the things that are easily checked by people, because that would be incredibly foolhardy. Even then, they seem to have done it in both cases. And I want to point out, at the time when the Chernobyl disaster happened, there was still a lot of press gag orders in place in Russia. And a lot of the measurements you're going to hear about are people just simply walking in and measuring things and not getting permission for it. For the same reason you can measure any radiation level on the coastline of Oregon, Washington, California. You can measure it in the oceans. There aren't any actual restrictions on this. If somebody sees you whip out a Geiger counter, they're not going to be able to do anything about it because they're not going to see you. On the other hand, in Pripyat, or wherever you want to call it, the Chernobyl disaster area, it was heavily regulated, and information still was leaked. There was no point in restricting it. But yes, I would say upwards of the Japanese government, at least, down to, at the very least, TEPCO, is absolutely notorious for ass-covering bullcrap, okay? Fukushima radioactivity released 780 petabaricles. When the numbers get so absurd, you act like it sounds like you're making up number types. But 80% of this went into the oceans. So we're talking about 100, I'm assuming this is correct, petabaricles. That means trillion, billion, quadrillion, something like that, okay? But the number is PBQ. That's the ratio of material released, the actual radiation released into the sea mostly. Detected maximum rating was inside of one of the reactors in the containment vessels, around it. Unit number 2, 210 sieverts per hour. And the exclusion range was 60 kilometers or 37 miles max distance, contamination detected, but 0 deaths. Okay, now that number doesn't get better anywhere because of the fact that nobody's putting up a current map or a set of stacked maps. The only people putting up maps that show changes over the years are anti-nuke people who lie about stuff and still show that wave height map as being radiation. Okay, so I can't use them. I'd love to use them as a source, but they won't take down fake maps. It says centimeters. Centimeters aren't a unit of radiation. Chernobyl radioactivity release. Instead of being the 780 with 80% being in the ocean, it was 5,200 petabaricles. That's a lot more. And again, most of that was kept to land because Chernobyl is not on an ocean side. It didn't bleed most of it off into the ocean. So the stuff is still there. Most of it, or all of it inland actually, still there, detected. Maximum detection was 300 sieverts per hour in the vicinity of the reactor core that day. Obviously, the plain truth of this is if you have a reactor core that's damaged and is doing an uncontrolled reaction, it's going to have a high sievert rating. That's within containment vessel. Okay, yes. Can you walk outside of the sarcophagus for Chernobyl and not detect radiation? No. Can you do so outside of Fukushima's location? In many areas, yes. The cutoff point is actually really, really close to it. And you can walk around with they don't keep you from checking radiation. 500-kilometer max distance for contamination detected, 310 miles, versus 60 kilometers for Fukushima. Not an order of magnitude, but pretty close. 28 deaths from acute radiation syndrome, 15 deaths from radiation-genic thyroid cancers, just like you would expect. 0 deaths from Fukushima as of right now. They can be confirmed directly related, except for one that is supposed to be associated directly, but I can't get a straight answer out of an official anywhere. Okay, let's say there was 1 death. Let's put it at 1 death. I'm perfectly okay with that. You would think there would be at least 1 death. It put out 780 units of actual contaminant at Fukushima. Chernobyl put out 5,200. These are not numbers that are disputed unless you're really, really working hard at it. Restricted area for Fukushima was a 20-kilometer circular zone, and then it was extended based on wherever they found any contamination, up to and including the max distance of 60 kilometers. So it's not completely round. I should also mention that the restricted area or zone of exclusion was made 20 or 30 kilometers depending on the year, depending on testing for Chernobyl. It's been many, many years since then. Okay? That's 19 miles if you're curious. And that was designated for evacuation, placed under military control, established by Soviet armed forces soon after the 1986 disaster. Its borders have been enlarged since then in an area of the Ukraine. Fukushima is becoming less dangerous, not more. People who, again, put up maps showing the damaged area or radiation maps always put up, they might actually put up some valid maps, but they insist on not dropping the scary one, the motivational, as some of them started calling it, that's of the height of the waves. Some of them have even gone to the point of cutting off the part of the map that shows you that it's measuring centimeters, not baraculs or whatever. If you're caught lying and you keep doubling down, no one should listen to you because you're a liar. I don't believe that we're being told everything about Chernobyl or Fukushima. I don't believe that. I check on it. But none of the indications show that millions have died or that it's at all even slightly worse than Chernobyl. That doesn't make any freaking sense when it's becoming... This is the homeopathic thing, where if it's less dangerous, we call it more dangerous, right? Grass and forest fires increased mobility of cesium, strontium, and plutonium years later around Chernobyl. There's no forest around Fukushima to burn. Dense cloud of radioactive dust killed off a large area of Scotch pine trees nearby, and the rusty orange color of the dead trees led to the nickname the Red Forest. See also the cesium-137 map below. This is something you can check. You can use a spectrum analyzer and determine what it is, and identify absolutely that it came from a nuclear accident, and maybe even which one. So, where are you getting the ideas that you come from to somehow make Fukushima worse? Because of need. It must be worse, because we can use that word. If you type in Chernobyl, everybody knows what it was. It literally contaminated most of Europe, and actually most of the world was hit with contamination. But somehow, we're not allowed to criticize the Chernobyl accident that was literally caused by stupidity and hubris and arrogance and doing an experiment in an unsafe manner. That's actually what caused it. No. It has to be space aliens and dustification or some other shit, right? Meanwhile, Fukushima was caused by, ostensibly, panicky behavior, covering my ass, that kind of stuff, but also an earthquake and tsunami caused it and killed all the people that died from this. They died from the tsunami and from the earthquake. This nuclear plant didn't cause this. I don't want nuclear power plants at all. And my rule is if a nuclear power plant has been damaged, you immediately decommission it as fast as possible, because if it wasn't in perfect condition, you wouldn't start it, so why restart it? The sarcophagi in Chernobyl has been upgraded to the point that it may actually completely seal it. We don't know, etc. You can look up all sorts of information below. Now I'm going to read the comment that led to this. And yes, it's a troll, and they're just going around doing the contrarian thing where they say up is down and left is right and the earth is flat to get a reaction out of people. And then they say, why are you angry? Why are you punching yourself, Jimmy? So here we go. Very wrong. Chernobyl was very low contamination from Fukushima. I didn't say that Fukushima contaminated Chernobyl. I'm assuming this is comparison. The material exposed in the explosion was much lower than all the water contaminated by melted material inside of several broken containers. Okay, this is that thing of, well, it's putting up billions of tons of water. Yes, billions of tons of water with very little amount of contaminant material. The total contaminant material that's gone into the ocean has not been millions of tons or hundreds of tons of material. There was like 300 tons of stuff in the reactors, let's say. Let's just use that as a number. The amount that's escaped amounts to a couple of grams getting in the water. It is dangerous. You wouldn't want that in the water supply, but it goes out to the ocean and it gets diluted rapidly. And it's a heavy element, so it tends to sink to the bottom and get into the silt. But yes, finally, after years and years of saying the west coast of the United States is frying, some of the radioactive material finally made landfall. They were able to detect some of it. A couple of years ago, it finally happened. That doesn't mean it was happening before then. Chernobyl was more or less controls in 3 years, and Fukushima didn't start because melted cores all groping into grown even in places where any monitoring machine could access in several reactors. At this point, this word salad is your challenge to figure out what the hell they were talking about. I'm only covering the one part that seems to be the idea that Fukushima was worse than Chernobyl. It simply was not. That's it. By every way to measure it that I can find, it was not worse. It was in a more populated area. The exclusion zone for Chernobyl is a specific shape, but trying to find a map of it is kind of a pain in the ass because everyone wants to not give you a map because everybody's really cagey about this. The one with Fukushima, they show you maps from 2011 or something like that. I guess the Tourist Bureau doesn't want any more maps published. The thing is, if you go into that area and ask for a map of where the contamination is, they'll give you a map because they have no reason not to. So I'm hoping someone gets a current map and posts it. It probably looks about the same. They're being careful about it. They allowed people to visit the areas where they used to live to pick up some belongings, bring them out for decontamination, check to see if they really were decontaminated, and then they could take them home, but they couldn't take them home if they weren't decontaminated. That's all I know about it. Mostly for paperwork and that sort of thing, and they ran it through a photocopier and threw the photocopier away. There's a lot of crap that happened in every single nuclear accident. Idiot maneuvers are done. Expedient, stupid stuff is done. Every time there's a disaster, people throw the rule book out. I understand that. But you have to actually show that there's a measured level of some kind that doesn't depend on your feelings to show that Chernobyl was worse than Fukushima. It is inarguably not. They're not even similar in most ways. Fukushima is still a disaster. It shouldn't have been able to happen. We should learn from this and not ignore it. And they should everything should be decommissioned when it breaks. Start over. Okay, I agree. But lying about this just means that you're sandbagging the anti-nuke movement by lying. No one has to forgive a liar. I won't. You shouldn't either. And I'm not lying. I have stuff to back it up down here. Would you mind telling me where I got this wrong? Thanks for watching. Have a